Okay, so starting with this vegetation one, we're going to show different ways on how to show some form of, in this case, a dynamic waffle planter. So we'll divide these into a bunch of grids, and then based on locations of points that we have in Rhino, we can actually start to change those sizes and location. So the first thing we do is you'll see that there's this divide surface component. So let's enable that and turn it on. We'll turn this one off. So you'll see that this is simply just making these very large divisions in the surface. For this case, you want to start off with these large cells because then we're going to divide each one of these cells even further based off of their proximity to some points. So the next thing we have to do is find the area. So we're going to turn this one on and enable it. So we have our area for each one of these cells. The next part, and you might have to actually include these in Rhino, you need to include or create for this exercise 2 points in Rhino. I have one right here and one right here. So let's go ahead and turn this part on. And what this is doing is it's taking those 2 points and it's projecting it onto our surface. So it's not just floating underneath our surface or above it, it's all being projected onto it. So you can now see these 2 points that are being projected onto our surface. So if you don't have those already, go ahead and just place 2 points somewhere in your Rhino space and reference them into these point components. So let's write that. So reference Rhino points.
Do we make them or are they there?
Yeah, you're gonna have to make these. This is, I think, the extent of what you're gonna have to manually do.
Just 2 points and one.
Yep. So like I said, I have one right here and one over here. I would suggest try putting them in that area just for, again, consistency. Okay, so everybody got their Rhino points referenced? Okay, so the next part is what this is doing, this closest point component, is it's measuring the distance from these points that we referenced with these center points of these cells. And we're using that distance parameter to determine how we're going to divide these cells. The way I did it for this exercise is the closer they are to that point, the less fragmentation of those cells happens. So you can imagine this cell is going to stay relatively larger, but as they get further away, these cells are going to fracture into smaller cells to make it, again, parametric. So we'll turn these on and enable them. There shouldn't be anything that actually occurs from it until we get to this portion. We can actually, let's go ahead and
I know yellow.
yellow or orange. Yeah, it's usually bad.
All I did was do 2 points.
And you reference them over here?
Yeah.
Where is it starting to turn orange?
Where's this divided?
Right at this, right here? That doesn't make sense. This is where it turned orange?
Well, everything else is orange.
I don't know. We'll have to look at that. So what this does, once we've enabled these parts, we can turn this one on Or no, we'll turn this one right after the subsurface divide again. And I'll turn preview. And let's turn off this one way over here. So now you can see that, like I said, the ones that are closest to these points stay fairly large, but then as they get further away, they start to fragment those cells even further. So these get divided quite a bit. These are a little less divided, and these ones have the most minimum division in their cells. And we can always use our graph mapper to change that. So like I said, the closer they are, the more they divide. So if you want to adjust how much division's occurring, I have it to divide like the ones that are furthest away from that point to divide it into 10 cells each way versus the ones that are closest divide into just one cell. But if you want to adjust that, you can grab these handles. And if you want to add more division, if you want to make these divided more, you can start to drag this and you can start to see how it makes those cells divided even further. If you want to have less division happening, you can take your handle and drag it this way. You can even drag this handle to make those cell division less. So this is really the main component that's going to structure your cell division. And what's good too is maybe you want this arrangement to happen a little bit differently. So you can just take the point in Rhino and you can even move it around and you'll see that your grid immediately responds to it, which is kind of cool. So it's kind of creating this interesting spider-like web. And basically you can see there's your 2 points that are at either end of this. That's why you don't have a lot of division happening, but then these areas that are furthest get the most division. Does that logic make sense for everyone? Yeah. Okay. So let's go ahead and move forward. The next part is really the kind of three-dimensional component to this, where we're going to convert these into some geometry. So we always want to take it a little bit further. So right now I've divided these cells into more cells. Now I also want to give them some three-dimensional quality to it. So the way this is set up is that the smaller they are, the more they're going to extrude above the surface. So you can start to imagine these are going to be a series of really small planters, whereas as they get further away, they start to run flush with the surface to allow or accommodate large tree plantings. That's the kind of idea that these can be raised planters and these are just designated planting areas. So let's enable this one. Preview. So we have our original curve. So we've taken this surface. I'll turn this one off. So we just have the curve. And we're going to enable that one as well. And what happens next? Let's turn. So we have our curve. We're going to project it down to the C plane. So now it's going to lay flush with the rest of our site, but it's also going to have this parameter where it's being extruded above this original surface. So you can see that these red ones have moved above your surface. These ones start to lay flush with that original surface. And again, we can use our graph mapper to change how high they extrude above our surface. If we wanted to exceed more than 3.5, we can double click this, maybe add another unit to it. So you can see that those start to go up a little bit higher. We can start to play with how many of them, so we can really do it so that the largest ones barely raise up, and then after that they all start to extrude away. Excuse me. So right now we have our curves that are being projected to the ground, and then these curves that are being raised above our surface or lying flush with it. So this part right here is really just a data organization because we've made different amounts of transformation to the geometry. We have to kind of organize that data. So don't worry too much about these. But here I'll just go ahead and enable the rest of this. So this is going to take some time. This component here, so now we've ruled a surface, or we've done a very simple loft command. And then, so let's turn this one on. So now you can see that it starts to take on that waffle effect when we turn on the ruled surface. I'm going to go back and turn on this green component so we can see what that original surface looked like. So like I said, these larger ones, it barely extrudes above that green surface. But then as it gets further away to this waffle, there's more extrusion happening when they're divided quite a bit. The last thing we want to do is actually give the waffle some thickness. So it's just a single plane right now. So that's what this component is doing, is that we're extruding it on the X direction. So if I turn this on, again, this is why I kind of disabled so it doesn't get too crazy. Now you can see that they actually have some thickness to them. Let's turn that off and let's just turn this on. And now I just have this black just to give it some contrast, indicate which areas are raised, which ones aren't, to create this kind of parametric planting landform. So if you want to change the thickness of your waffle, you adjust this component. So let's write so there's your waffle thickness. Hopefully no one's too hungry talking about waffles. This will be extrusion height. This last graph mapper. And then this graph mapper controls your cell division. Simple enough. So you're gonna really just be, and then obviously you have your points, so you can move your points around in Rhino. You can change how much cell division happens. So this controls where the smaller ones are, where the larger ones are. This one controls the height of those extrusions. And then this one adjusts the thickness of those extrusions. Simple enough. There's really only 4 things you have to manipulate in this. All right. I'm going to go ahead and just stop this one.